Well, hello again, everybody. This is John Norris at Trading Perspectives. As always, we have our good friend Sam Clement. Sam, say hello.
Hey, John. How are you doing?
Sam, I'm doing fantastically. But I've got to tell you, I've been making a lot of public presentations recently. And despite all the good news that seems to be coming out of some of these reports, it seems as though people are a lot more concerned about the consumer than perhaps they should be, at least according to the black and white data that comes across. So it kind of makes me kind of wonder exactly what's going on. After all, this week, the Bureau of Labor, not the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the Bureau of Economic Analysis announced during the fourth quarter of 2023, the U.S. consumer grew at a 3% clip, which is pretty robust, all things being equal. And so yet, why are people, in your estimation, why are people so concerned about the consumer, the health of the consumer, and why do you keep hearing anecdotal evidence about how people are tightening the belt and being more stingy, I guess is the best word?
Well, it's been you're right, that the data's pretty conclusive that the economy's been strong. You can break it down and there's weakness in parts of it as much as you want, but headline numbers, the data is good, the economy is strong, that is inarguable.
Yeah, I mean, if you're finding a negative story, you're going out trying to find dark clouds and silver linings.
Yeah, and I feel like we've been in an environment where at least good news can kind of be good news again, but you're right, it's been a weird, really since COVID, I would say, weird time, and I think it's just gone on so long. There's been shortages, there's been too much inventory, there's been inflation, prices aren't coming down, they're slowing in how much they're going up, but the longer that goes on, it's created this sort of snowball effect, and it continues to impact consumers, but clearly not as much as some people had anticipated. So to me, it begs the question, is it a good thing that people are being maybe a little bit more cautious with how they're going about spending and what businesses are doing?
Well, based on some of the most recent personal income and spending reports, not this week's, but the previous ones, we had seen a steady erosion, really, in the savings rate, which longer term, I would say, is not necessarily a good thing. There's the old paradox of thrift. The more you spend, the more you generate economic activity, the less you spend, so on and so forth. However, there seems to be some magic number out there that below that number, the consumer runs out of dry powder. Too much above that number, then consumers not spending enough. And remember, we're a consumer-driven economy. Let's just round it up and say 70% of our gross domestic product equation's based on what we spend as consumers. Mm-hmm. So you don't want the U.S. consumer to not spend money, but then again, the consumer spends all their money, then they run out of the ability to spend in the future.
Yeah.
If you catch my drift. So when I take a look at things, I can't argue with the numbers. You're right. The numbers are what the numbers are. I go driving around town and my eyeballs are telling me things are pretty good. Mm-hmm. Without a doubt. However, I got to tell you, Sam, I don't like spending money. I really don't. But even so, I'm being more mindful of what I buy at the grocery store. I'm being more mindful of the types of stuff that I purchase, and I'm hardly one that can call poverty. So if I'm feeling this way, surely a lot of Americans are feeling this way. And if I'm feeling this way, surely a lot of Americans are feeling a lot more angst and a lot more pressure to save money. So it's kind of that weird scenario that you were talking about. The numbers are great, but not everyone believes them.
And that's the thing, though. The numbers headline are good.
Yeah.
Consumers haven't felt that good, at least for a while. It's starting to tick back up and be a little bit more positive. But overall, even looking at the consumer data, the consumer, I would say, it's hard to argue that they're in that bad of a spot.
No.
I mean, debt-to-income ratios are not that high they're not soaring amongst any quintile of earners. So we're seeing relatively healthy consumers. Yes, we've had the headlines of credit card debt going up, but those are talked about in nominal terms to instill more fear and not about how much wages have gone up either. Yeah. So you're spot on that. I think consumers aren't even feeling maybe the truth about themselves in a lot of sense. I think people so much, I think you and I are probably in the same boat. No matter if your income goes up more than prices do, you just focus and feel the cumulative increase in prices. And that we've talked about it and couldn't come up with a good answer of what the timeline is for when you start to normalize that prices are just higher and when people start to feel better. And I still don't know the answer. I'm hoping that we're getting there because I'm in the same boat. Prices still kind of shock you at times, but overall, I think people have to get over that hump. So I'm hoping we're getting there.
Well, when do people get over that hump? And you and I've talked about it, and I've kind of come to the conclusion that you can kind of bucket the U.S. consumer into three primary, buckets. The first one is when you feel really confident in your situation, as Dickens might have called it, your situation, your job, your prospects to earn money, your ability to generate more money, to have a bigger incentive, all that stuff. Feeling confident right here. And then when you're in that sort of bucket, you're spending money pretty freely.
Yeah. Even if you don't have it.
Yeah, even if you don't have it, you're spending money pretty freely because you are convinced that you will have the money in the future. The second bucket is when you feel comfortable. Not necessarily confident, you feel comfortable. Feel comfortable that you're going to have a job, but you're not necessarily thinking that you're going to get a 50% bonus at the end of the year. You're going to get a cost of living adjustment. It's kind of like, I can continue on this lifestyle and I'm fine with it, but I'm not going to step out of it.
Hope for better, glad it's not worse.
Yeah, I'm just kind of comfortable. I feel comfortable about it. And then there's obviously the third bucket where all of a sudden you start getting worried about your job. It's your employers letting people off, where they start talking about, we're going to have significant cost savings this year, or just heck, your neighbor loses their job, or you just read the headlines, unemployment's going up. Then all of a sudden, when you're in that bucket, the lack of confidence, that's when you start kind of reining stuff in. You start sort of reining those expenditures in. And so what I'd like to do is kind of talk a little bit about that third bucket. It's just, I don't think we're there yet. I'm not saying that we are there yet, but it's fascinating to me, the type of things that people would consider luxuries, the luxuries in life, and then also those things which they simply will not do without. Earlier this week I was making a panel presentation for Milo's Tea here in town. Milo's, by the way, fantastic tea, love it. The green label, the unsweet is fantastic. I tell you, they're now up to $750 million in sales. That's a lot of tea. I don't mind telling you that.
That's a lot of tea.
And I've got to tell you, I think that product right there is kind of one of those ones. When you get down to that third bucket, you're really retrenching. That's one of those ones. You got to pay the utilities. You got to do this. You've got to pay those things. The completely inelastic stuff. You have to do it. I think that's one of those products that people are going to be loath to go up. It's that sort of like that little luxury in life that doesn't cost too much. That gap between the generic brand and the branded brand is just that value add to make things worthwhile.
Yeah,
and so
you need quality still.
Listen, it's good tea. But I've got to ask you. I want to see if there's any sort of generational differences. What are those things in your life? If all of a sudden things got very rocky. And they aren't going to, by the way. But if things got really, really rocky for you, and you're really concerned about your financial well-being, you got to pay those bills. What are some of those surprising things that you can't imagine giving up as Gen Z or SM class?
That I do not want to give up. That'd be the last thing for me to give up.
Last thing.
Give you my best answer would be traveling for me, but there's a caveat to that, because I love traveling so much that I'd be willing to sacrifice other things before, and I'd even be willing to sacrifice some travel to keep up the same style of travel, if that makes sense. Instead of, if it was 2 big vacations a year and things are getting tighter, okay, I don't want to do 2 subpar vacations. I'd rather just do 1 and keep it up. So that's something I'd fight tooth and nail to keep up. It's something that's important to me.
How about a little bit closer to maybe in the weekly grocery bag?
Yeah, that's one. I mean, I love steaks. I think that'd be a hard one for me to give up in terms of groceries. But, I view it more as what I would cut out is just a little bit of everything, per se. If you eat out 2 times a week, 3 times a week, maybe you do it 2 or 1 time a week now, because that's an easy way to save $80, couple $100, depending on where you're going and how much. Just kind of all over tightening the belt just a little bit instead of necessarily just one thing.
All right. Well, I got to tell you, I might be a little bit different in that, I'm a little bit older than you are.
A couple of years.
Just a couple of years. And, the prospect of a retirement, if I do decide to ever retire, is much closer now than it was. And Beth and I took a look at what our expenditures last year were, and we spent money pretty freely at the beginning of the year. I'm not going to sit there and say we were necessarily extravagant, but by some measures we were. And we just sat down at the end of the year and just went, we can't continue to do that type of thing. And it's really kind of a joint decision. It wasn't just me being the economist saying, no, listen here, you. And I don't talk like that at the house, by the way.
Not usually.
Well, not usually. I do when I'm trying to scare her. But, in doing that, we just agreed we had to cut back on some things. And little things that we've cut back on are things like eating out. We don't go out to eat quite as much. And for me, that might be one of the first things to give up.
Yeah.
Just get eating out. Because I'm a pretty good cook. I like to think I'm a pretty good cook. I enjoy cooking. She enjoys cooking certain things. I mean, she doesn't enjoy the Tuesday night dinner. What am I going to do? Go take a look in the pantry. I don't mind doing that. She hates it. But in any event, you catch my drift. I think that might be one of the first things I would give up. One of the last things I'd give up might be my dogs, of course.
Yeah.
And then I really like getting a good book. Just a good book. I mean, I'm going to sound like a real nerd, but I like going online to Amazon when I find a book that I want to read, going and buying it. And I like the whole sort of
having the
ceremony of the book. I don't like the Kindles and the readers, the electronic readers. I don't like that. I like picking up. I like the feel of it. I like the dog ear, all that stuff, the ceremony of book. So I think books might be something that I would just really be loath to completely give up and just say, I'm not going to buy any more books. I mean, I'll probably buy a dozen books this year. Might even be more than that. I mean, I can't even tell you what I've read. But
hopefully you don't have to cut that out.
Well, I hope I don't have to cut that out. But that's one of those little luxuries for me that make life sort of kind of worth living. And I just kind of wonder what it would be for other people.
I think for a lot of people, and me included, in terms of eating out, I think it's those the fast casual to not super nice dinners, that kind of range, that is the easiest to cut out.
Okay.
Because personally, I love going out to eat, but I don't like going out to eat and spending $50 to $70 on just a pretty average meal. If I'd rather spend $100 or a little bit more and have a fantastic meal, great time, but just going out because you don't feel like cooking, those are the times that are easy to cut out. But it's so interesting, people as a whole are still going out and spend. The data doesn't really show that people are necessarily tightening as much as the polls about what they say they are doing, if that makes sense. I mean, people are spending tons of money. Goods levels as a percentage of income are still very elevated. People are still spending money on services. I think that's slowing down a little bit. But overall, you have these two things, what people are feeling and then what it seems like they're doing with their money.
Well, I'm going to tell you, I think we might be a little bit alone. Or not in the majority in terms of what we would cut out. I'd cut out restaurants pretty much in general. You would cut out that fast casual.
Yeah.
And, I'm not sure if I brought it up here, but I've certainly talked about it around the office and even in Common Sense, our blog/newsletter, talking about how I went out to the Summit here recently and how, I got tricked into doing it. Summit is our shopping center here in town, a major one. It's really nice. And Beth wanted to go to Anthropologie to buy a candle for a friend and all that stuff. And I'm in the car and I'm out at the Summit. I have to walk past the Cheesecake Factory. The place is just, whole shopping center is just groaning with people. I have to walk past the Cheesecake Factory. And I said, baby, you should go get a slice of Dulce Leche cheesecake after you're done at Anthropologie. And she took me up on it. So it's about 10 minutes after 5. The place is groaning with people a line to wait in line to get a table and all that stuff. And I came to the conclusion that if I ever came out here on a Friday and Saturday night when the weather's okay, not when there's ice on the ground or hurricane or the Alabama-Auburn game on a Friday, if I just ever come out here on a standard Friday or Saturday night and I can immediately get into the Cheesecake Factory, that's when I know the U.S. consumer is screwed. And so I say that because I think that might be something a fast casual, even a Panera, that sort of deal, is one of those little luxuries like I feel about books. You feel to a bigger extent about vacations. But for a lot of people, that's that little luxury in life. It's a step up from McDonald's, but it's not quite going to Perry's or
Chez Fonfon
Chez
or
Fonfon or
Bottega.
Fleming's or
Yeah.
something like that. It's nothing like that. So you can still go there. You can get the burger. It would come from fries. I think it's $16. Get a drink, and it's not going to necessarily break the bank. It's not something that you're going to do every Tuesday night, but on a Friday and Saturday you can. And that's where I think that sort of type deal is going to be one of the last things that a lot of Americans would want to give up. Of course, some might have to give it up. I actually think people will be more willing to give up McDonald's
Yeah.
than going to that little luxury, that Panera, that Cheesecake Factory, Houston's, the restaurants of those ilk.
Yeah, and I think we've seen it from some of those companies you're mentioning on the low end of spending. They've said they're starting to see more cutbacks there than some, exactly what you're talking about. Not high end, but kind of a little bit of a treat place to go. It makes sense, and I think you're seeing that a little bit, but I can't say I'm a big fan of the Cheesecake Factory, so I don't think you'll see me in the line for that.
I'm not going to get in the line either. Nothing against the Cheesecake Factory. When I was younger, I loved it. Now it's just not. It's not my cup of tea, and that's fine. I understand.
It probably
why-
hurts them putting the calories next to everything on the menu.
Well, it does, but even more than it's just I mean, I'm going to go out and spend. It's just
Yeah.
I'd rather go elsewhere. There's nothing wrong with it. I understand when people like it. Now, speaking of sort of those lower end ones, and not to pick on McDonald's, and listen, we got to put a caveat out there. We're not market makers, nor do we own any sort of inventory or big buyers of any of the names that we mentioned: Cheesecake Factory, McDonald's, any of that stuff. Anything we say here, it should not be considered offered to buy or sell investment securities of any type. All that good stuff. I went onto the McDonald's website to take a look at just how much things cost there. And I think nationwide, the average price for number one value meal, which is the Big Mac, by the way, which you probably haven't had in a while.
I have had one, not in a while, but
Yeah.
I have had one.
It's like $13. $13. Let's say 13 and a quarter. The hamburger Happy Meal is like, I'm going to round up, 7 and a quarter. So let's just say your parents going out, 2 kids, 2 Rugrats. You each get a Big Mac value meal. Your Rugrats get hamburger meals tax. You're spending a decent amount of coin.
Yeah.
I mean, by the time you round it all up here in Alabama, where I live in Birmingham, in the Birmingham metro area, 10% tax, sales tax. You're spending about $45
For McDonald's.
for McDonald's. I think that is something that when it used to be McDonald's was one of the last things people would give up. I'm almost more of the opinion the way the consumer spending patterns have changed, that McDonald's purchase might be one of the first things people give up.
I agree. 100% agree. It's kind
They
of
would rather spend the additional $20 to go to the Cheesecake Factory, pretend that you're living it up, get someone to serve you. Instead of getting 2 beers, you get 1, or you get an iced tea or a cola or something like that. And that way you can have that dining experience for very little more, not a lot more than what you can get at, I mean, even a Chick-fil-A is close to $50 for a family.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of a joke. McDonald's tastes great and nostalgic at a certain price point, I think. If you go there and could spend a couple bucks and get McDonald's, like, sure, sounds great. But if you're going there spending $30, $40, $50, which sounds like it should probably be more food than it probably would end up being.
The burgers seem to be smaller as I've gotten bigger.
But nonetheless, it's something that sounded probably a lot better in the low double digits.
Oh, listen, I don't think it sounds great at 13,
Let alone at 40.
Yeah. So, all that stuff. So, when it really comes down to it, when you kind of break things down into buckets, I'm not sure if January's car sales numbers, which were horrible, I'm not sure if the personal spending number that we saw for January, which wasn't good, I don't know if those are starts of a trend. 1 month does not a trend make. You had some bad weather throughout the country, all that stuff, that could have altered consumer expenditures. However, if we see another month or 2 months of the same sort of type automobile sales, same sort of very tepid sort of personal spending numbers, I'm going to say that for whatever reason, the U.S. consumer will have been shifting from that confident bucket in terms of their job and into that comfortable bucket. Still spending money, still going to the summit on Friday night, still going to the Cheesecake Factory, still going to Anthropologie, still doing all that type of stuff, but they're pulling back on some of the bigger ticket, more elastic goods and services and saying, I can wait a few months.
So
I can wait 6 months.
one last question then for you. Do you think that is always a bad thing? Given
No.
the current environment.
Given the current environment, the way that the consumer spent last year, and Beth myself included, that was unsustainable.
Yeah, that's so it's that tightrope of being less confident that you can just hop jobs 4 or 5 times and get 20% raises each time in a year, and at some point not wanting to be the last in kind of thing.
Yeah.
Given the current environment, if you can have a little decrease in confidence, as bad as that may sound at face value, as long as it doesn't get worse, and that's the tightrope.
Yes.
Given the current environment, it's not the worst case scenario, and that's where the Fed is not the only interested party in this, but they play a big role in it, and they've got kind of a tough job of when do they let their foot fully off the gas.
Yeah, so if we can see the U.S. consumer grow 2 to 2.5% this year, that'd be great. Absolutely fantastic. You won't have to see massive layoffs or anything like that, but you will see prices continue, or the price increases continuing to come down, inflation continuing to grind lower, which gives the Federal Reserve a little bit more room to make the cost of money in the United States that much cheaper, which ultimately will help drive consumer purchases again. So, but the little bit of a pullback, a little bit of a cooling, letting a little bit of air out of that balloon, no, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing here at the start of 2024 after what I can consider to be a just feverish end to 2023.
I agree.
All right. Well, guys, we always love to hear from you all. So if you have any comments or questions, please, by all means, let us know. You can always drop us a line at tradingperspectives@oakworth.com, or you can leave us a review on the podcast outlet of your choice. Of course, if you're interested in reading more or listening, reading more, hearing more of what we have to say or how we think, you can always go to oakworth.com, oakworth.com. Take a look underneath the Thought Leadership tab for all kinds of exciting information, including links to previous Trading Perspective podcasts, links to our blog/newsletter Common Sense, and links to our quarterly magazine and all of its individual components, which we call Macro and Market. Now with that, Sam, one last chance to say something just like unbelievable, super weighty, and
set me up for disappointment, because that's all I got.
Crazy intelligent. All right, that's all I've got today too. Y'all take care.